All right, folks, the Ripple family is a growing, and I know that this came out last week, but it's important for us to understand the difference between a bank and a trust and what role Ripple is ready to play as a lender of last resort in this coming debt, currency, and liquidity crisis. Let's get right on into it, folks. We're going to start out with a little bit of technical analysis, crazy XRP price predictions. Warning, warning, this might trigger some, but we're gonna show a bullish chart for XRP, and then we're gonna get into what I'm talking about with the acquisitions that Ripple has been up to. Let's take a look. One of the most hated, one of the most loved in the community, crypto bull. XRP is following the same structure as 7 years ago. Next moves, $2 in March, $6 in April, and $39 in May. Now, let's calm down here, crypto bull. How dare you talk about such crazy price predictions? And what's important for me to understand is that we have a time frame that we're now entering where I think we're about to see some fireworks go off in the digital asset space. You have the halving coming up in April, and typically we see, right, that the rally is going to start slightly before and really continue through the halving, and that we're still a long ways away from where we finish off this cycle. But you got to remember that these altcoins can blow before Bitcoin, right? They can go before or they can go after. And so it's not always going to be at the same exact time that Bitcoin's topping out. I mean, that's the whole thesis, right? We watch Bitcoin swell up and then the money and the liquidity flows into the other assets. So even if you disagree with Bull's predictions on $6 by April and $39 by May, what I agree with him on is price action around those times, right? I still do think that we get a little bit of a break, a credit event maybe could be coming in here in the next month and a half. I think that March is prime for a credit event or some sort of banking crisis. And so that's what I'm watching for. And then after that, I think that we do get fireworks as far as price predictions. Well, I'm just going to be happy to see us break up to a new all-time high in our first wave up. You know, the 6 in April to 39 in May is a little too exciting, a little too much for my comfort zone as far as expectations and predictions for XRP coming up in a few months. As far as long term, well, okay, we can talk about those numbers, but in the meantime, just watch for the breakout. That's the point that I wanted to share with you guys, is that it is coming. Whether you're on the super bullish spectrum or whether you're on the conservative TA spectrum, the move is already started, really. It's just that the broader economy, the broader financial markets and banking system is breaking as we watch, on a daily basis. But continuing on here, what we see here, folks, we're talking about acquisitions and the Ripple family growing. They are hiring, by the way, at almost every location. So if you're looking for a job and you got some skills, Ripple might be able to get you taken care of here. Seems that Ripple have some big plans for their crypto custody solutions. This one's from Anders. New job offer at Medico offered in New York. Medico is developing world-class custody infrastructure designed for Tier 1 institutions. This is not a game, folks. They're not playing around. They're going after Tier 1 institutions, and this is Medico. Next, we're about to talk about Standard Custody and Trust, which is the massive acquisition that they just got. And what this does is it gets them that regulation in that banking chart. Well, sorry, it's not the banking charter. It is the trust. It gives them charter status as a trust company, not a bank. And I'm going to show you the difference here in just one moment. But what we're talking about, folks, the acquisition of Standard Custody just adds to the progress Ripple has been making. When we see this, they are already at 40 money transmitter licenses across the United States, including a New York BIT license. And now with Standard Custody and Trust, they're getting this charter status as a trust company in New York, approved by the New York Department of Financial Services. Assuming that this deal gets allowed to go through and the regulators sign off on it, maybe the regulators will try to hang up Ripple one more time. Oh, you're getting done with this SEC lawsuit? Let's throw this stick in your wheel. And This is so massive, folks. Let's break down the difference, though, between a bank and a trust. I think this really describes how Ripple's setting themselves up to be distinguished amongst all these other big banks, even the systemically important banks that, JP Morgan, that can say, yeah, we're got the full faith and backstop of Janet Notel and Yellen and the Federal Reserve. We're never going to go down. That's great, but that doesn't mean, right, that you still don't have exposure. You do have exposure and you are at risk. And that's because a bank lends out your deposits, right? So you deposit them money. And we've seen JP Morgan's deposits have grown tremendously, which will allow JP Morgan to do what they do best, which is, play around with these markets and control them in the way that they do. On the other end of the spectrum, you have a trust company which does not lend out against the customer deposits. So read it right here for you. We have this post that I put out, Ripple to acquire Standard Custody and Trust, the difference between a bank and a trust company. A bank is a financial intermediary accepting deposits into the reserves and making loans against those reserves. A trust is an arrangement that allows a third party or trustee to hold assets or property for a beneficiary or beneficiaries, but does not allow for the trust to use those reserves to facilitate other business. This is a key distinction to be made between a bank and a trust. So what is Ripple setting themselves up to be right here? Someone who can custody your assets on behalf of your trust, your estate. You want to set up an escrow. We can help get it done for you, right? And continuing on, this is from Paxos.com, and Paxos is a trust company that's been set up. Obviously, they handle a lot of, I believe this is the same Paxos Treasury that manages Binance USD. Maybe I'm wrong on that, and regardless, Paxos is this trust company, and I did take this from their website, this link that I'm talking about right here. But this is important. Unlike a bank, a trust company does not lend your assets out. It holds your assets' bankruptcies remote, fully segregated from corporate assets. Kept in a bank, your assets will likely be used to make loans, and should the bank go out of business, the insurance on your assets is capped at $250,000 by the FDIC. If your assets are held in safe custody by a trust company and that company were to go out of business, your funds are held away from creditors and fully redeemable at any time. So basically your assets are actually safe, right? And with fractional reserve lending, we're talking about lending out 10 times the value of your deposit. So if you lend, you deposit $1 million at the bank, they're going to be able to create $10 million worth of loans based off of that $1 million deposit, fractional reserve lending. And this is how money actually comes into circulation, is they're issuing debt. That's how it's done. And this is why I think that Ripple is setting themselves up, distinguishing from the rest of the space, not just digital assets, but the rest of the banking world. They're not set up to be just an ordinary little bank. I know many people thought, is Ripple going to become a bank? Will Ripple be bought out by a bank? Well, to me, it looks like they're looking to set themselves apart. And the way that they're doing this is they've set themselves up to be a one-stop shop for liquidity. You can move or convert any digital asset. They're setting that up through Liquidity Hub. They're going to build out some of the best liquidity in the world on the XRP ledger after the AMM goes live. And then they're setting themselves up for custody, but not custody in how a bank operates, doing custody and lending out against the custody of your deposits, but actually holding the assets responsibly, which is what a trust company does. Now, this is how they've set themselves up to be a lender of last resort. And like I said, they're not just serving one country, so we can't compare them to a central bank. I think it's more reasonable, a better comparison, to compare them to the IMF or the Bank of International Settlements, which many people think is crazy, outlandish, and way too far. And I just simply ask, what's a better bridge currency in the world right now? You can find the US dollar as a more used, more liquid currency. But as far as a neutral bridge currency, besides gold and silver, you have XRP, which is set to become way more liquid. And the world wants these alternatives. And we're seeing that. And so this is a trend that's only picking up from here. And the other trend that's picking up from here is the fact that these banks in the United States have hundreds of billions and trillions of dollars of unrealized losses on their bonds and toxic derivatives exposure and trillions of dollars of commercial real estate and negative equity. So this is a situation where the banks in the traditional financial world is breaking. It cannot show up to be a lender of last resort. It's going to be looking for that lender of last resort. And for the banks in America, they're just hoping that they're big enough that Janet Notel and Yellen will back up the backstop, back up the truck to bail them out. Otherwise, they're screwed. And so this is why the banking crisis is not over in the United States. The debt, currency, and liquidity crisis that we talk about is not over. It's still picking up. It's still building up. And I think that it breaks here soon. We need to be prepared for that moment. And we might be looking at one of the last buying opportunities coming up. Although I showed you some bullish TA, remember what I said. I still think that we get a correction. I still think that we see a credit event. I still see the other banks collapsing. Shock events. I still see bombs going off. Unfortunately, I continue to pray for peace, but they're about to shake things up. And this is why I say we got to continue to stay focused, controlling our energy and bringing order to this chaos. You guys already know the deal. Everything can be found on my website. And I just appreciate everyone for stopping by. Thank you so much for sharing it out far and wide. God bless. I am your host, Zach Rector. I really appreciate all of the love and support. If you want to support the channel, just remember that you can start by smashing that thumbs up for me, sharing this content far and wide, and everything else is at my website.